Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the day after the backyard brawl, and this is Post-Gazette Sports Now, breaking down what was a huge win for Pitt on Thursday night at Acrisure Stadium against their rival West Virginia. I am Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Post-Gazette, and with me today is Brian Batko. He is our Steelers reporter, but he is also a Pitt alum, and he covered this beat for a while, so he's quite familiar with many of the players involved. And honestly, Chris Carter and Noah Hiles, who you saw yesterday on our preview video, we're giving them a bit of a break after a busy night at the stadium. Brian and I were more in relaxed mode watching the game, so we're ready to talk to you today. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, Adam, and Noah and Chris did a fine job covering it. But what do they need a break from? They're not exactly working in the mines out here. I mean, come on. But I'm happy to do it. I was at the game, and like you said, covered the team for 2.5 seasons essentially before switching over to the Steelers. So I'm much more casual spectator slash football enjoyer now when I watch Pitt than I am reporter. So maybe that'll allow me to bring a little bit different perspective. I certainly had some fun last night down at the game. You can probably hear that in my voice.
Absolutely. What were your initial impressions of the game? Just kind of 30,000 feet. What were some of the things that you noticed that really stood out?
I mean, the passion and energy for sure. I think that's what everybody is talking about day after. You could see it starting down there on the afternoon on the North Shore. I mean, the lots were full. It was more of a jovial atmosphere than I expected. I think Pitt and West Virginia fans were both just kind of happy to be hating each other again, if that makes sense. They were happy to be in each other's presence for this. It felt like old times, and once the actual players got out there on the field at Acrisure Stadium, I think you could see that there were some jitters, as you would expect from a rivalry game. But by the end, plays were being made, and I don't know if legends being made is too strong of a term, but it was a really fun night all around for sure.
I believe MJ Devonshire is gonna. I mean, that one's gonna live on for a while. That pick six at the end, to win the game. He's a hometown guy, so I think that's certainly gonna live for a long time in the lore. In terms of game atmosphere, what can you compare that to in terms of Pitt games, if anything? Was it like that famous 2016 Pitt Penn State game at Heinz Field?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I was at that game too. It's funny. That was actually right before I started covering Pitt football for the PG. And then I go to this game, without any work duties either, right after I cover Pitt football. So, yeah, I think those were two pretty similar environments and atmospheres. And I think that 2016 was a better quality game against Penn State. It wasn't an opener. You heard Pat Narduzzi kind of kept mentioning that both before and after the brawl on Thursday, that it's the opening game, kind of alluding to there's going to be some kinks that you have to work out. So, that game that they played against Penn State back then, the second lap around the track for them, they were sharp. That was Matt Canada's offense. A lot of what would become the staples of him at Pitt, we saw against Penn State that day. So these are pretty on similar ground for me. I think the game against Penn State might be a little bit more memorable, maybe a little bit more exciting in terms of the action, whereas last night's first half was a little bit slow at times, and we know that the game took forever, but from a just pure energy and vibe standpoint, it's on a very short list of Pitt games there.
Let's talk about Kedon Slovis a little bit, Pitt's quarterback. He's gotten some kind of mixed reactions on social media so far. But I think expectations were unbelievably high based on what Kenny Pickett did a year ago. And I think there's kind of been an expectation among some that he'd be close to the Kenny Pickett level right off the bat, and I think that was always unrealistic. It was also true he didn't get to throw the ball much, especially in the first half. I was shocked. They put a graphic on TV at halftime, and it said he'd only thrown 8 passes, and West Virginia's JT Daniels had thrown 21. So he didn't get a ton of opportunity in the first half to really impact the game. And then number 3, he was sacked 5 times. So he was under quite a bit of pressure. What did you think of the performance that you saw from Kedon Slovis on the maiden voyage here?
Yeah, mixed bag, some good, some bad. And, I think that's what you would expect from a guy coming in here, making his first start with a new program. The nice thing about him is that he is pretty polished. He has the experience at USC that's obviously going to help him resume his starting role at the college football level. But you also saw some of what made Kenny Pickett great. Maybe he doesn't quite have that. I think his pocket presence left a little to be desired. Some of those sacks that he was taking late, I was almost flashing back to the Tino Sunseri days of Pitt football, and especially Pitt football playing West Virginia to little success at what was once Heinz Field back then. But he got it going just enough, and put some balls on the money. So it's one that's not going to show up in his stat sheet that Bub Means kind of had in his grasp and just let it slip through. I've heard good things about Bub Means for sure, and obviously Konate Mumpfield showed you already last night that he's exactly the stud that everybody thought he was going to be transferring in from Akron. So I think once everybody gets on the same page there, that'll help Slovis continue to improve, get better. I was a little bit unsure of him going into the game. I'm not completely sold coming out of it, but I think I did see a lot to like.
Should we be worried about this offensive line after giving up 5 sacks? Obviously, they had, pretty much everyone coming back. They were touted as a strength of this team, able to carry some of these new players at skills positions, because so much has turned over in that regard from last season. How do you feel about that offensive line after seeing last night? They did pave the way reasonably well, in the running game, but they did give up those 5 sacks. What were your impressions of how they played and compared to where they, should be with their veteran experience?
I think they're going to be fine. I do. Maybe that's famous last words, and they're going to struggle. But I just think that not only do they have all that experience back that you mentioned, not only did they do some good things in the run game, they also have a lot of flexibility there. I don't cover and follow it as closely as I used to, but I know that they're not just that 5 is pretty solidified, but they did have to bring some guys off the bench last night. I think they have other options to go to at really every position on the line: tackle, guard, center, and they're players in some cases that are young and promising. They're players in some cases that have been around here and could step in off the bench if need be to minimal drop off. So I think when you have that kind of internal competition, it's going to help you coalesce and gel as a group, because if somebody isn't playing well, then you've got another guy to throw in there. So because of all that, I think they will round into form. The pass protection does it needs to improve. There's no doubt about that. But I think they'll be okay. They're also playing against one of the better D linemen in college football, I think, in that Dante Stills from West Virginia. I believe he could have been an NFL guy if he wanted to come out last year. Instead, he returned, and it looks like he's going to be a monster in 2022 for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, let's talk about West Virginia. What did you think of what you saw from them, kind of before that final pick? I think they were surprising a lot of people with how they played. I think the pass rush, certainly after I covered the team to some extent last year, and that was kind of a weak point for them. They really weren't getting to the quarterback a whole lot. To see them do that last night was encouraging for them, even in defeat. And they seemed to make some plays that last year they did not make, certainly, and I think they looked like a better team than I was expecting them to look. For it to go down to the end like that, I thought West Virginia played better, and I think they have a chance to be pretty decent in this Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I guess the key for Neil Brown and those guys is, can you bring that kind of energy every game, not just the rivalry game, not just at Pitt, season opener, backyard brawl, returning. They absolutely they played their butts off. They're going to need to do that against teams that they don't have a hatred of and a long-standing tradition with. So JT Daniels, he can spin it. You saw what made him such a talented and coveted recruit coming out of high school. Seems like they might have found something with this Donaldson guy at running back. I know Narduzzi was really disappointed in his own defense, and it kind of, reading between the lines, seemed like he thought it was more of what they weren't doing versus what West Virginia was doing well to move the ball on the ground. But they've got some nice pieces. Ford-Wheaton looks like he's going to be a go-to guy for Daniels, so they could do some damage in the Big 12. They might be a year away, and it seems like Neil Brown is on pretty solid footing there at WVU. So it was a closer, tighter game than expected, and you got to give West Virginia credit for that. It's also going to be really fun just to see how this thing takes shape the next few seasons that they continue to play each other. Obviously, the Pitt will have to go down to Morgantown a season from now, and the Mountaineers will have the home field advantage. So it's going to be fun to track these two programs that obviously they're not in the same league. They aren't competing for conference titles against one another, but that big game is going to be circled on everybody's schedule year in and year out now.
Yeah, I was really impressed by Donaldson and especially Ford-Wheaton. I think that was a real big weakness for them last year is they didn't really have playmakers in the passing game, and then they lost to the extent that they did. They lost guys. I think Ford-Wheaton looked like a true number one last night for them. Aside from obviously the fateful tipped pass that ended up being intercepted and returned for a touchdown to lose the game. I saw them calling that a fluke after the game. I think that's pretty much what you have to write off. Especially with what you got from Bryce Ford-Wheaton in the first 57 minutes of that game. Are there any other conclusions we can draw about either team or especially Pitt from a rivalry game, or is it partly what we're talking about in terms of West Virginia was bringing a different energy? Pitt probably was too. It's a different environment. There weren't a ton of sold out games like that at Heinz Field last year. Do you have to write off some of what happened just because it was the first game and it was the backyard brawl?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Narduzzi was very, very adamant afterward that, the issue specifically with the run defense, that they're going to get that corrected, which, from covering him for a few years like I did, when he's that confident or sounding that confident about something, it's pretty obvious that he knows what tweak he needs to make. And, say what you will about his defensive resume and, his coaching chops, but he did it for a long time in the Big Ten at Michigan State, coordinating defenses, and obviously still has a big hand in Pitt's. And they're coming off an ACC championship season in which the offense kind of carried the day for them most of the time. But I still think that this Pitt defense is as good as you can play defense in college football in 2022. They're going to be better than what we saw in this one, and the nerves factor I think is real. It should give them a chance to settle down and settle in for against probably an even better opponent, honestly, next weekend with Tennessee coming to town. That should be really fun too.
Yeah, that you set me up perfectly. What are you curious to see next week? Because there is no rest here. You're rolling straight into an SEC opponent after a big rivalry game. It's not your grandfather's non-conference game with some warm-ups against overmatched teams. What are you curious to see from the Panthers this week, and what else do you think we can learn about them, as we start to look ahead toward ACC play?
Obviously, got to see some more progression from Slovis, right? I mean, sitting where I was in the stands last night, some people were calling for Nick Patty. So, you've seen in the past, Narduzzi can be a little bit itchy when it comes to managing the quarterback situation. So I think Slovis needs to continue to make some strides there to ensure that he doesn't get replaced by a pretty capable backup who's been around in Patty, and that'll help the whole offense go. Defensively, I mean, they could have their hands full. This Hendon Hooker quarterback who transferred in from Virginia Tech, I believe, had Tennessee putting up like 59 points last night, granted against Ball State, but they've got some talented newcomers down there in Knoxville as well. Personally, on a just Brian Batko note, my aunt and uncle moved down there. They live right outside Knoxville, so they're always kind of telling me some things about the Vols. And my neighbors right across the street here in Shaler, they're from Cookeville, Tennessee originally, so they're big Tennessee Volunteers fans. This lead up to the game is not quite West Virginia level, but for me personally, it's going to be kind of fun to see the Pitt and Tennessee roads clash together a little bit.
Yeah, it's always fun to see big games, period. And Tennessee's a historic program, got a lot of history, so it's exciting to see these teams get together again after that trip down to Knoxville last year. Well, that's all we got for you guys today. We are still working on the schedule for next week with Labor Day, but we'll be back either Monday or Tuesday.
Do you think Chris and Noah will be fresh enough, or do we need to give them a couple more maintenance days to get ready?
I think they'll be ready to go. I think they'll be ready to roll.
That's good.
I know Chris is also moving, so that's part of the equation for him too. So so we'll be back next week. I'm not sure who you're going to see and when, but hopefully Monday or Tuesday we'll be talking about a Steelers game because we have next Sunday everything getting going with them. A lot of college talk this week, but we're going to be getting hard and heavy into the Steelers talk, and we might be seeing Brian again soon before too long.
A lot of orange coming up for both local football teams.
That is true. Cincinnati on the schedule next Sunday. So everyone have a great Labor Day weekend, and we will be talking sports with you again next week. Thanks for watching. Oh, and please like and subscribe this
Yeah,
video
do that.
to this video to help us with the YouTube algorithm. We're trying to really get things going. We had a huge response to the first 2 videos. We thank you all for that, and we hope you'll like and subscribe. And please consider subscribing to post-gazette.com. We have a subscription deal in the description. 6 months of access for just $6. So that's a deal. That's $1 a month to get access to all articles, no paywall to worry about. So please consider, supporting the journalism as well. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Algorithm.